Congress took the Fifth Amendment and her ringleaders were given immunity. And if you're not guilty of a crime, what do you need immunity for, right?
That was then candidate Donald Trump at a rally back in September, referring to investigations into Hillary Clinton's private email server. And now, 6 months later, Trump's former national security advisor of just 24 days says he's prepared to talk to the FBI and congressional officials who are investigating possible Trump campaign ties to Russia, but only if he's granted immunity. A letter released yesterday by his lawyer says, quote, no reasonable person who has the benefit of advice of counsel would submit to questioning in such a highly politicized witch hunt environment without assurance against unfair prosecution. Let's talk about all this with veteran prosecutor and legal analyst Paul Henderson. Also with me, Juan Zarate, an MSNBC senior national security analyst and former deputy national security advisor under President George W. Bush. So, Paul, let's start. Take us behind the scenes. What's happening right now when lawyers for Flynn sit down and try to make their case?
Well, what they're doing now is trying to entice the government with unrestricted conversations and trying to make that enticing to the government to offer them the broadest immunity deal that they can. And what's going on the other side is
what does that mean, the broadest immunity deal they can?
So what they want to make sure is that they are protected from any prosecution or investigation beyond just an individual incident. And this is the difference and the distinction between use immunity and transactional immunity. And so the broadest way that you can get an immunity as a defense attorney representing a client facing charges like this or facing an investigation like this is that you want the broadest and biggest umbrella possible protecting you so that you cannot be prosecuted for information that you share about your behavior. And that's what's at its core in this case, because we already know that there's information out there about him possibly misleading the vice president. But the real issue in the core is whether or not he has shared information either with Trump himself or with the White House counsel about what his dealings were, and that's the core of the perjury clause and the perjury issues that prosecutors are investigating right now and thinking about for potential charges. So that's what's going on behind the scene. And
Juan, how common is a request like this, and was the president right when he said, if you're asking for immunity, you did something wrong?
Well, there's the perception politically, right? And certainly when you ask for immunity or plead the Fifth, there is sort of this shadow of potential guilt. But certainly when you have legal jeopardy in the context of an ongoing FBI investigation, which is quite serious, obviously, and congressional inquiries, this is quite common. What is unusual, though, is to have somebody of this stature asking for the immunity at this early stage. And
what does that tell you?
Well, that tells us a couple things. One, I think they want to kind of get ahead of the narrative here. They don't want to necessarily have to be responding to subpoenas and then requesting, and so they're trying to get ahead of the curve a bit, I think. I think you also have the fact that this is a very toxic political environment. This is taking on political tones that are very dangerous in a sense. And so if you're the counsel for General Flynn, certainly you want to give him counsel to protect himself as early as possible, and to do so not just legally, but also in the court of public opinion. And so that means, look, present yourself, offer to cooperate, but we're going to do it under certain conditions, and conditions that will protect you from criminal liability.
Well, speaking of politics, the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, just tweeted, let me quote it, "The public should learn a lot more about why General Flynn wants immunity when Sally Yates testifies before the House Intelligence Committee." Paul, what do you expect from this, and will we learn more?
Well, you're going to learn more because I think all the prosecutors and investigators are going to ask for a proffer, and they're going to want him to outline more details about what that unrestricted conversation would look like. And then they'll be balancing whether or not that information is more important than the investigation that they already have with their target and suspects in terms of the bigger picture about whether or not the White House counsel had information beforehand or whether or not actually Donald Trump had information beforehand from Mike Flynn. And that's what's happening. That's what everyone is evaluating and what they're trying to see if they're going to offer him this immunity and what that immunity will look like and what it's going to protect him against versus what the potential of what that damaging information is going to have against the administration.
And then there's this other big story this morning that Congressman Devin Nunes got information related to his investigation into Trump's wiretap claims from officials working at the White House. Juan, you worked at the White House in national security. What did you think when you heard these reports?
Yeah, another unforced error, right? Why is this happening? Crossing of both issues and responsibilities. You know, the committee has a responsibility to investigate this. The chairman has responsibility over that. The White House has its own responsibilities with respect to how it manages intelligence, how it manages its own internal investigations and cooperation with the Congress. This begins to muddy the picture, obviously, creates perceptions of collusion, which is now why Chairman Nunes is being asked to perhaps recuse himself. And I just thought, look, this is another unforced error. It's a little bit too much cloak and dagger. The chairman has access to intelligence. If you have a reference to an intelligence piece, a report, that can be conveyed. You don't have to have him over to the White House. And at the end of the day, the White House has access to the intelligence it needs. And so it struck me as a very impatient move and one that really created a needless confusion and potentially even conflict at this point.
Juan, good to see you. Thanks for
Likewise,
coming in.
Chris.
Paul, thanks to you as well. And up next,
pleasure.
President Trump will sign 2 executive orders focusing on trade today, less than a week before the Chinese president comes for a visit. Is President Trump trying to send a stern message ahead of next week's visit? We'll be right back.